Welcome to Extropy on Air, the podcast from Extropy Advisors, where we dive into the world of AI, digital transformation, and the future of business. Each episode will bring you perspective from leaders, innovators, and experts across industries, all focused on helping organizations and, more importantly, people thrive in a changing world. Let's get started.
Welcome to another episode of Extropy on Air, your digital finance podcast. My name is Mike Jasper. I'm a vice president here at Extropy Advisors, and today I'm joined by Cecile Brown-Smith, one of our project managers. Cecile, it's good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you as well, Mike.
Thank you for doing this. I know you're in the middle of a move and you've got boxes everywhere. You just got the keys to your house. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I've actually used some of the things that we're going to talk about today to make sure that we didn't have any massive failures. So this is perfect.
Best teases I've heard. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Today we're going to talk about why most of the strategies that fail don't fail because they're wrong, but it's because the organizations can't necessarily execute them. We're going to explore what we call the execution gap, the systematic forces that cause your well-defined strategies to go awry. So Cecile, I think that's a great example of a move is probably right up the alley. But let's jump into a little bit. We were talking a little about the gap between strategy and results and execution. What are some of the gaps that you see between the strategy as it's defined in a lot of projects and what you see at the front line of different projects?
What I've noticed is that the leadership, while they are extremely excited about the project and they can articulate a pretty clear strategy, there's no frontline experience. And so then it becomes confusing. The priorities end up having to shift and there aren't real clear expectations set. This is a trend that I've noticed across different types of industries. So something can sound amazing on a PowerPoint. You could be the PowerPoint king or queen. But if people don't understand how that's actually impacting them and their daily work, or if they don't understand how it's affecting their employees, then the execution starts drifting almost immediately. So the execution really lives in the daily behavior.
I think that's a good point because if we think about it, the strategy is typically fundamentally changing something in the organization. That's why it's a transformation.
Mm-hmm.
So we're asking people to take what they do daily today and completely change it. And they don't necessarily know what that future state is or how to get there. They may have a strategy of this is what we're doing. We're revamping procurement or we're going to automate accounts receivable, but they don't necessarily know what that means to them or to their job or to their daily activities.
Exactly. And that's where the confusion comes in. So now we're in that.
Why do you see that typically happening? What do you think the biggest gap is there between the decision to do a project and sort of that strategy of doing a transformation to the actual execution?
Entropy could be a guiding factor here where there are inconsistent processes and there are these very small, minuscule breakdowns that don't seem like a big deal when you're looking at an overarching type of a strategy meeting, but those breakdowns pile up over time. So now there's unclear expectations and there's duplicate work being done because we didn't get into the minutia of it all. And now we have different people who know something and they have tribal knowledge. They knew this because they've been working there for 25 years, but this is not something or someone they spoke to. So nobody knew that that was something that needed to happen. And that's where some inconsistencies can come in.
And you bring up a good point. Entropy, for those of you who listen to this podcast and listen to several different episodes, it's a common theme. Entropy, for those of you that might be listening to us for the first time, it's really the natural breakdown and disorder that occurs in nature. The best laid plan breaks down over time. The best laid process breaks down over time. And really the goal when we think about a strategic transformation is to eliminate that, to build something that's sustainable, that's something that's repeatable. And that cohesion is what we call extropy. It's the opposite of entropy. Cecile, let's jump into entropy a little bit here.
Okay.
Talk about how entropy in these different processes, in different communication systems, how it kills execution. Is that In your experience, is that all at once, or how does entropy come into the equation?
Well, first, when we were reviewing this topic this week, and I thought about entropy, and I was like, I had an aha moment of this. The name of our company makes perfect sense because, like you said, we are the opposite of entropy, which is where things start to just slowly unravel because, again, the intentional structure is not there, and so these small gaps where we have the lapses in communication or things that weren't considered, or like I said, with the tribal knowledge, there are unknown unknowns to the people who are making the decisions. Then we fall into those pitfalls of not having a process for that piece because we didn't know that it existed, or we created the wrong process because we didn't talk to the correct people who are down on the floor. So then, not entropy, but extropy comes in. And like we said, it's the opposite. We're here for intentional improvement and evolving and creating order. The order that we assist with our customers helps them to not miss these little things that seem little but make a great impact when they pile up.
100%. I think that in thermodynamics, entropy is a natural process. It happens across everything, and it happens without any effort. It's the natural progression of something is to break down. Extropy is something that takes force. It takes process to be continually monitored and continually enforced to create that extropy within any process. So one of the things I see, one of the reasons I think that entropy arises in the different transformations is the lapse of a North Star. There's no success criteria defined for the team in that strategic vision of what are we trying to accomplish. We say what we're trying to accomplish. We don't quantify that into real tactical goal for the team to meet. What are your thoughts on that?
That is a major gap that I see consistently, not being able to articulate from the North Star, knowing exactly what that is, and also informing the other people who will be involved in the processes of what that is. They understand what their job is, and then we have leadership that understands what they're trying to accomplish. And if these two people are not talking to each other, then we have these small disconnects. You can know something in theory and how it should work, but if you don't have the different design workshops where you are going through and looking at everything that has to happen in order, what we need to design in order to make sure that A, B, C, and D happen, because that's going to affect the next step. So it's really interesting to watch people because we know this innately. We know this inside, but it's not always thought about. And again, without the right people involved, then you don't get the information that you need to make sure that you've ticked off all your boxes. And that allows us to keep evolving though, because things change. And so if we do have a baseline where we've covered all of the things that we do have, then as Extropy, we can go in and help you evolve these processes.
One of the things I see that quietly kills that execution is some of the redundant things that come up in a project. So
Mm,
you end up with a lot of duplicate work.
exactly.
If the communication's not clear, people are looking at it and saying, "Well, is that for me to do?" And you end up with two people doing the same task, which one, it's inefficient, but two, it really impacts the morale of that project because one of their deliverables isn't going to be used. And then they're going to start thinking, okay, well, I'm going to do less, or my input to this project isn't as valuable as somebody else's. Now you start getting less and less out of the actual core team that's doing that work. The other side of that is the planning and alignment. If we look at a project, every project plan starts with planning. It starts with aligning our resources, putting together a project plan, but really the planning is a phase that needs to happen throughout the project. We have to consistently be revisiting the plan, realigning our resources. Things come up in people's lives. They have to go out of office unexpectedly. A new project comes up that's competing for their time.
Hmm.
We have to be able to continuously realign as we go through so that we have the proper people, the proper resources at the right time, and they still know that why and they still understand the actual work that's being asked of them.
Yeah, and that North Star that you mentioned earlier, understanding where we're trying to get to helps with that a lot, with planning and knowing what we need and filling in those gaps, like you said, when people have to be out or we have to change a strategy or something like that. So that is a very important piece.
Yeah, I think we've touched on a topic here a couple times. Let's dive a little deeper into it. It's
Mm.
ambiguity.
Mm.
What in your opinion is the role of ambiguity And how does that translate to the strategy in action?
So, what I've noticed is that people hesitate or move kind of inconsistently when they don't know who owns the decisions, what the priorities are, what the next steps may be. This is where we have this ambiguous idea, but as we've mentioned time and time again, there are no steps, and we don't know exactly who's doing what for what. You know what I mean? So these are things when people know what they're doing, when they have more understanding of what success looks like and who owns the next steps, they tend to move bit more, how do you say, with a bit more confidence. They move faster. They are still in, and like you mentioned earlier, the buy-in, they're still ready and don't feel like their part doesn't matter. So when we do that throughout at the beginning, but definitely throughout the project, that clarity creates the momentum that you need.
Yeah, and I think the opposite side of that clarity, I think we can all relate to this example, but what happens when you send an ask out to 10 different people?
Mm,
How often do you get a response? Or more often than not, everybody thinks that the other 9 people are on top of it and nobody responds to you.
yeah, those group chats do cause a lot of ambiguity throughout the organization.
So having those really clear impacts of I need this from this person at this time and this is why, in my experience, really helps clarify a lot of that ambiguity in the project.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I think the other side is really understanding the why. When we put an ask out to the team, if people don't understand the why, number one, you may not get the answer that you're expecting. Our resources and our teams are very knowledgeable, especially in a current state process. And if we don't really explain what we're trying to accomplish with something, even a task or a question, then that person may not give us the full feeling. We don't know what to ask in some cases. So
Exactly, exactly. The wrong question could give you the wrong answer. Like you said, knowing how to ask and what to ask is very important. And who to ask.
let's talk about um, why traditional strategic planning so often ignores the execution infrastructure. Do you have any thoughts on that? What have you seen from some of the different projects you've been a part of?
Well, I've seen where we start a project, we are having a great kickoff, and we go over the visions. There's this beautiful PowerPoint of what's going to happen and goals. And there's a CFO, AP supervisor, and an IT supervisor. And that's all the people that are in the call. So now we are there where we have great understanding of where we're going, but we don't know the workflows and communication systems and who needs to be trained and how to get a support for adoption for the rest of the end users. This is a big one because there is great intention from the leadership and people are busy and that's understandable. But if we put into practice focusing heavy on having the vision, but understanding the workflow to create that vision and to reach the goal. If we do this well, then the execution of the project will go much better. I've enjoyed the kickoffs where there's 30 of us in there because they have 4 different departments in accounts payable. And they're not just going to bring the supervisor. They brought the people who are literally typing in the ones and zeros all day. And when we get to the design workshop and then the training, they've been there since the beginning. They've given us everything that we needed to know and the buttons that they're pushing at beginning or end of month closing. So it's beautiful to watch people who sometimes leadership forgets are just as important as the people who make the decisions at the top. We do need to know all of the different ins and outs through the workflows.
You hit on 2 key points that I always bring up, and you did it probably better than I will, but I'll give it a shot. The strategic planning, a lot of times that focuses on the why and the what, but the execution infrastructure has the how and the who.
Mm-hmm.
And there's
Mm-hmm.
a gap between understanding the why and the what of an initiative and who's doing it and how they're doing it.
That
And
part.
that gap, if it doesn't get filled, leads to a lot of that entropy in the
Hmm.
project. I think the other point that you made that I focus on a lot is um, that execution infrastructure doesn't include the right people. It's made at a strategic level. We know we need to think about if we're doing an AP transformation, for example. We obviously need accounts payable in there, but the project planning doesn't account for needing finance, supply chain execution
Hmm.
resources. It doesn't account for infosec. It doesn't properly account for IT involvement,
Legal.
legal, audit.
Legal is a big one people forget about.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many projects we've been in where you design the entire process and you ask the right questions and you get the answers, but then somebody comes up and says, well, this doesn't meet, legal has an issue with this, or tax and compliance doesn't like how we're doing. We want to do something in this country. That type of inclusiveness in the project plan in the team is going to give you a lot better result earlier because you're going to have all that input from the right areas to think about that process.
Mike, I have a saying that I tell a lot of the clients toward the beginning. Strategy is aspirational, but execution is operational. And when we can kind of get that and understand the people that need to be involved, then we can avoid situations, like you said, where we find out later. Literally happened last year when we included legal. The person left, a new person came and was like, oh, the guys, there's also this A, B, and C. Nobody knew. No one knew. And it was very important for the go live that was next week. All of these little tiny pieces, like we said earlier, good callback on entropy. You should go into writing for comedy. We have all of these things, these tiny things that pile up over time.
Absolutely. And they happen slow and consistently. So you don't realize they're happening until you start getting the exceptions. You start getting the negative feelings in the project, or you start getting, um, you know, uh, points where you're not meeting your success criteria and somebody's asking why. And all of
Uh-huh.
a sudden you look back and you've got all this entropic, um, a- you know, activities happening outside of the project or in the project that are causing some serious issues.
I agree.
All right, so let's go ahead and wrap this up. Thinking through all the stuff we've talked about today, how do we build execution systems that convert that strategic intent into real daily behavior? Really, how do we help organizations align that strategic planning with the execution infrastructure?
This is something that may sound very generic, but it is important. Consistency matters. Being consistent in our strategy and consistency in checking the processes and not just, we saw this, moving on, having repeatable systems, accountability and understanding who that involves. The communication rhythms is a big one that gets pushed down to the bottom wrong. It should be a little bit higher to the top. Daily reinforcement also helps in whatever that looks like for your industry. I think that a strategy only becomes real when people understand how it changes how they operate every day. And that's the big piece that we have to get there to get so that we can be consistent in how we plan this project or how we move with the team.
Absolutely. I think that goes right into one of my first points is defining success criteria, making sure we understand qualitative and quantitative results we're looking to accomplish and communicating those from the strategic planning into the daily execution so that we know that the team understands this is what we're trying to accomplish and why, and what it means for me and what it means for my team, my coworkers, my colleagues, because that's really going to get you the buy-in in the project. And, projects get complex. People have their daily jobs, everybody's at some level of overwork during a project. It
Mhm.
helps give that motivation and that North Star to really drive some of that work and keep you from getting in the weeds in the wrong areas.
Agree.
I also think that execution plan is really something we need to do a gap analysis on. To your point about, for example, bringing legal in, really understanding who are all the different parties that may have something to say about what we're doing, even if it's not part of their daily job. Maybe their daily job includes a quarterly review of something that is going to be impacted by this process.
Mhm.
Maybe some certain data that is an output of this process. Bringing all those different departments and groups together is going to give us a lot better understanding of how this impacts everybody in the organization, not just the day-to-day users of that process.
Agree. Agree. I don't think the strategy fails because people don't care, right? Like that's never the issue. It's really like you said, they underestimate how much the structure is important and having clarity in the way that we execute and reinforceable execution. These things are so important, and the planning that you talked about, the steps that you were talking about, they should take. Everybody wants to do well, but we really do have to be intentional about the way we go about structuring this well-oiled machine we're building.
We need to be intentional on how we structure it, and we also need to be intentional on how we plan and continuously align that
That
plan
part.
throughout the project to make sure we're always looking at the why, we're always looking at the how, and we're focusing on the people doing the work and really guiding them towards that success criteria. If we get them to buy in on that and we help them through the process, we're going to have a lot more successful outcomes than partial outcomes.
Agree.
Very good. Well, Cecile, I'll let you get back to unpacking and moving and enjoying that new house. But for everybody out there, appreciate you listening to us. And if you like this episode, you haven't heard some of our previous ones, feel free to go back and listen to the rest. And if this spoke to you in any way, if you gained anything out of this and you think that somebody else in your organization or one of your other colleagues may enjoy it, send them a link to the podcast. Let them listen and experience this as well. So thank you all for joining, and we'll talk to you again next time.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for listening to Extropy On Air. We hope you found today's conversation insightful and inspiring. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode, and connect with us at Extropy Advisors to continue the conversation on AI and digital transformation. Until next time, I'm Kevin Zirkle, and this has been Extropy On Air.